Okay, around the holidays, I always like to do something about the holidays, of course, and this year's no different. In years past, I've done ones about Christmas trees, of course, and the origin of each little component of Christmas that we have, from Saturnalia to the ancient tales of Dumuzi in a secret grove where they selected a tree out and decorated it and put gifts in the whole 9 yards that are there, to taking trees indoors. And we'll look into that also. But also, this past year we looked at tree worship. And so, in doing so, we probably have a little more insight whenever we look into something about this. So, let's look into this. This is the ancient history of the Christmas tree and its pagan roots. How the forbidden tree survived against all odds. It's difficult to imagine a Christmas celebration without the beautiful decorated Christmas tree at home, or one lit up actually in a town square, or for all of America in Washington, D.C., or the New York one that always happens. Become quite a ritual. Just in the United States alone, more than 40 million real or specially grown trees are sold during the Christmas tree period each year. There are Christmas tree farms all over Ohio and the Northeast, and there's a little bit out northwest too, that's done up in there, and all of their huge forest expanse too. Generally in the places where they grow the best, but you can find a fantastic Christmas tree right here in Texas too, and there is a Christmas tree farm not far from me. I live close to Dallas, so you can get a lot of variation on these types of things, but make no bones about it, whenever the trees all lose their leaves, they're the only thing that are green right there. In fact, that's their spring right there. They seem to perk into action a little bit and ride through the wintertime. Now picture the number of sold trees worldwide, other than that 40 million. Almost everyone who celebrates Christmas wants a Christmas tree, and whether it's a real one or an artificial one, the tree is simply an appreciated tradition and part of our holidays. Nowadays you can buy a Christmas tree in all sizes and even colors, but who, when there, did the tradition of having a Christmas tree actually get started? And they're going to try to relate it to Christianity and so on like that through this. And just take a moment here to wish you and yours the very best in this holiday season. And I know that sounds cliche, but I mean it in the way it sounds. Especially in this year 2020, where we've had so many issues and problems. Christmas is always a special time for me, being a child growing up, and I'm sure it is for everyone. Some of my fondest memories about it are the glistening extra lights that are there, and it's not like Halloween, it's Christmas and everything's lit up. More people participated in it, and even if you didn't see a house lit up, as you drove by and looked through their front window, you could see it. But there was a time whenever you wouldn't let anybody see it. We'll get into that in a minute. Other than getting the special gifts of Christmas, one fond memory I have that just keeps coming into my mind is looking real close at the Christmas tree. We had a couch that we would separate over and have to move things to put it exactly where it goes every year in its special corner. But in doing so, you could sit there and just stare right into it. And I remember staring right into it and looking into Christmas balls and how your face would be warped and being amazed by it. But in doing so, I started thinking a million different thoughts. And of course, at this time, it spurred me in a lot of ways to look up and try to see what the whole thing about the Star of Bethlehem is. What's this? What's that? Through the years, through that pecking at it, especially around Christmas time, I started to realize the reality of how deep that this actual type of holiday goes. Most people understand that it's the winter solstice, and it's the changeover and the death of winter and the way it switches out. In a modern day, winter, if you'll notice, seems to be shifted a little past winter. It comes into it, and December 21st is sure as hell not the middle of it. It just says here it's happening. It's already snowing up in the Northeast, and Hell, a month and a half ago it snowed up in Colorado and things, but that can be somewhat common. A northern that pushes it all around and down, even into Texas, doesn't even happen most years. But I remember whenever I was a kid, it used to happen a whole lot, and then it started happening less. They started bringing on that, oh, global warming and everything else, but let's not get into that. That's not actually the reality of things that we're talking about. Holly, mistletoe, hanging a stocking by a fire, and a tree go way, way back. Way back to the point that people were making stockings. It's the only thing that you can date out of this situation. In our very first writings of the people of Sumeria, they have a connective that tells you, I'll go into part of it in a moment, it's in your actual Bible, but it kicks back at it somewhat paganistically, and there's a twofold to that situation that could be going on. But this pointy pyramid-shaped tree of life is kept sacred indoors, topped by a star, glistening lights all over it, very much like the twinkling of stars. And we've been talking a lot about astrotheology lately, and here it is in it. Remember being a kid, one of the earliest times I might have been third grade or so, and we set it all up, and after looking at it and Googling in it like I was when I was a kid, I realized that when we put them all on there real quick, as each one of us did, because at that time everybody got one and went and put it on, and so on. And of course I couldn't reach to the top. Even my brother couldn't reach to the top at that time. And we had to wait till Dad got home and he put on the star. Then we turned it on. We did that for a few years, then we just went ahead and let go with it. But I remember in those first years seeing that there was way too much red in this one area, and if we had one more ornament, there's a big open area up here. So I decided to take one of the reds and put it up over here. Then I looked at it a little more, and there's two greens real close together, and there's two reds close together over there. I'll just switch red to green right in the same spot. That looks good. My mom was coming in, she was like, what are you doing? And I said, well, there's too much red and there's too much green. And she came over there and said, yeah, I see what you're saying. And I said, why don't we just switch this and that? Or we could put one right there. She takes it and puts it right there, and we step back, and that looks fantastic. For years after that, I had that same moment where every time we set up the tree, we'd just go ahead and do it. But then afterwards, you'd be like, there's something kind of missing. There also came a tradition to where there were certain ornaments that would be done in certain ways. There was an ornament that was close to the middle of the top always and facing out for sure, wasn't stuck in the back. There was one of our kids' ornaments that was always up for each one of us that was around on the bottom of the tree, going around. My parents did a neat thing where they would only put, about this much presents up under the tree, and you think you're getting two or three things, and then Christmas morning you'd find that Santa Dad's shown up, because there's all these stuff that's out of their box, just like boom, all set up. Mine's over here, my sister's is over here, my brother's is over here, G.I. Joe stuff and everything all set up. Well, round about between 5 and 6 years old, I got up to go to the bathroom and heard them talking and saying things, and I went to look down the stairs and got a look in there, and they were setting up all the stuff and talking about it, and I was quiet and listened just for a minute, and everything come to reality to me. And so it kind of sucked. My brother and sister went on for a couple more years other than that, and I was the youngest one, but yet played it off. Yeah, I did that with my kids too, and we got to a certain point. I got the oldest one before the family got to know about it all. I got the oldest one to 11, and then told her, "Nah, and you better go with it." One of the reasons I had them go with it so well is that the one time it did snow right at Christmas, and it was the Christmas before my mom passed away, we had a good snowstorm here right on Christmas, and I had them come down and visit. We were the host of the Christmas party. I had Christmas ornaments galore and wrapped around the thing, and trees and all this stuff, and they were going on the whole 9 yards. in our smaller house, but we were able to host it. And after they left, it snowed again, and it got pretty thick, and we were building snowmen and stuff, and it's real cool. But on Christmas night, it had snowed again, and all that day of Christmas Eve, and there was a fresh blanket, and nobody had even drove down the street. And somebody lost control of their car and went through our neighbor's yard and up through our yard and back out over here, and it left trail tracks. So me and my smart-ass ways, after setting up some of the kids' stuff, I got the idea, and I put on my little fluffy slippers that I got one day early for Christmas on, and my robe and everything, and went out there and froze my ass off. But I tried to make it look just like the reindeer had got here and Santa had been here, walked back through my steps and everything. And so the next day, whenever the kids went through their whole thing, and I go, and it's snowing, I wonder how deep it is now, and we'll be able to see, and they were almost too enamored with their stuff, but I got them to look, and they looked outside, and they went, oh my gosh, and I was like, what? And I winked at my wife and everything, and went and looked out, and Santa came through and everything, and she looked at me like, what the hell did you do? I had to explain it to her later and everything, but I had the kids going. In fact, for years after that point, whenever other kids would say, oh, da, 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 she'd be like, no, I have personal witness, the whole 9 yards, come up through our yard and everything. He may not come to your yard anymore, and your parents have to make up for it, but anyhow, let's just get into this. We take Christmas trees for granted, but did you know that this was once considered a forbidden tree? People were not even allowed to have it at home. It's amazing how the Christmas tree survived it against all odds. Makes you want to play that 1980 song. As with many other Christian traditions, we find the answer to our question by examining pagan festivals celebrated by our ancestors. Trees have been worshipped since ancient times. It goes way back before writing and the Sumerians that I talked about, for it was an already adopted thing. Many ancient cultures have worshipped trees that have become a symbol for life, like the tree of life. Yggdrasil in Norse mythology is an eternal and sacred ash tree with branches that stretch out to harbor 9 worlds. And this is, of course, reflected with the 9 layers of hell and so on that we talked about recently. It has 3 roots, and each one reaches a different mysterious world. Whenever I played this in Dungeons & Dragons, we had it worked out this way, and I had to go save Yggdrasil one time from this thing that was kind of like the Ent trees in Lord of the Rings, and did an incredible battle with it. Don't want to get into it necessarily about it, but it was cool. And then afterwards, I got this honor thing situation that nobody ever got, and da-da-da, and all this, And ancient Celts held nature and animals in high regard, like elves, and their Celtic tree of life served as a portal to invisible worlds and a source to sacred knowledge, guarded by the most enlightened ones, like the Druids and so on that we talk about. And a lot of the tree worship we talked about was in Proto-Indo-Europeans, and of course those people kind of became the same people. Ancient cedar forests that were so revered by the ancient Sumerians and the people of the Fertile Crescent. Even Egyptians, they loved the sycamore and the yew tree. And you find out, you study the yew tree, and it's the story of elves. And that everywhere an elf died in ancient times grew up a yew tree, and the yew tree was from ancient times the tree that was used for making longbows, not for riding bows. A lot of statues are either sycamore or yew in the ancient Egyptians, but in ancient India we come across the kalpa tree. This sacred wishing tree has long been an adornment of worship. It was believed that this tree produced the fruit which nourished the first men. This is an echoing of the biblical tale in a different light. Like the apple, if you will, among Native American tribes even, the cedar which we talked about in the Sumerians, is considered the most sacred tree. It was the first tree planted by man in the third world to save people from a flood that happened. According to the Navajo Dinah, which is also in your Bible, Dinah, well, it's Dinah, but yeah. During our attention to Mesoamerica, we learned that Mixtec, Aztec, Maya, and other cultures considered ceiba trees to be sacred. There's are most likely some exceptions, of course, but in ancient as well as modern time, trees play an important role in traditional cultures around the world. You hear about the olive tree, frankincense and myrrh made from things, all this stuff, the Yule log. Your houses are made out of them. It's extremely an important object. It's been revered, but there's even spirits that are inside of trees. It's the essence of the forest, like elves, like I've told you about, and who they actually were in other videos. In many mythologies, the tree is represented as the source of life, the center of the universe, and the cosmic tree. There's a world tree. There's a world tree talked about in your Bible. I'll get into that in just a minute. Remind me. To Christians today, the Christmas tree is of special importance, but the green tree we decorated shortly before Christmas was pagan roots, and there was a time when it was not accepted by the church. In fact, it was kind of outlawed, and so scenes like this would have been more kept a little more hidden. Back in this time, even before electricity, people were taking small tallow candles and putting them on dishes that had attachments to them to clip it on the ends of branches that didn't have a branch right above it, by the way. And there would come a night whenever the whole thing was happening, and Mom would light these all the way up. Dad would light the very top of it and then sit down and light his pipe while the kids adored on it. And while you got all exalted in how pretty this was, someone started to sing. And the songs of old were kept this way and always done. So whenever you were enamored, it helped to keep it in the small children's minds that you see here. That light 'em up tree like that's not so good of an idea, and enough houses burned down that we're lucky once we came up with electricity, we were faking that situation in colored bulbs and all kinds of stuff. Everything started when people decided they want to have green plants inside, and this goes way back. Even the Babylonians had hanging gardens and so on. My mom had hanging plants around, and plants always in windows and things going on, and clippings, starting a new plant up, starting another one. So whenever spring came, she'd put them all in plants. She'd keep them in for the winter. She had certain plants outside that whenever it got to wintertime, she would cover up and put up against the house, or better yet, put them in the garage in this whole little area right there, and even let the car be out, because they'll die. They were seedlings, they were only a certain height, wasn't going to work too good, but you could keep them through the winter a whole lot quicker. According to the folklore beliefs, green plants, like a green man, and trees protected people from various evil forces, such as malevolent spirits. In fact, it would be a good spirit inside the tree that would ward it off. And of course, that pine scent and things went along with this idea. This also explains why mistletoe was so sacred. Well, mistletoe deserves their entire video by itself. It's a parasite type thing. There are all kinds of folklore about it. One is which was where a raven, like the bird of Odin, sat upon a tree during a certain moment. Lightning striking the tree caused it. It's where it had been touched by a god. It's a tree that contains, well, there's a bunch in this one tree. There's none really over here. That's because that one contains the spirit. Get up under a mistletoe and get kissed. Well, in my other video about Christmas, I don't know which one I'll release first. Probably the other one after this one, but it talks about hanky-panky Christmas, if you will, a little bit. and what makes the world go around. But that's for that other video. I'll save you for that. It's pretty special. It makes connections all the way through the Milky Way, all the way down to Egypt, Ireland, and ancient Proto-Europeans, and so on. During the winter, when these days are dark and cold, green plants and trees serve as a reminder that the sun will return and we may embrace warmer days eventually. See, because what's happening is the sun is going down 1 degree per day that the Sumerians figured out. At least that's where we have it at this point, because they at least wrote it down somewhat. It comes from before that, though, because we find ancient temples that I've shown a bunch of already where they already have this shit going on. And lining up certain things, and they go, well, that's not Taurus Saltus and everything. That's lined up to Orion. That's lined up to this. That's lined up to that. Here's the one lined up to Sirius. Vikings believed spirits known as Vatir lived in trees. This is like the Afrits and sprites that you think about are these entities that live inside, like elementals and so on, dryads and that type of situation that live in trees, just like there were ancient river gods and things like that for these elves that were in tune with the land, and there was pretty much something to go with everything. We've talked a lot about it and how it goes with sacred geometry and the whole 9 yards. And when you start to see the depth that they have of it, it lets you know what lost cultures can we still find. You were like, we're talking about one now because nobody knows this crap, and it's only from inside the last ice age ending. But it comes from before. Or they wouldn't have it to that level, but let's continue. They didn't want to let these small creatures freeze during the winter, and these Viking-type people and others there would take trees inside, letting the spirits enjoy a warm and cozy atmosphere at home, like my mom did her hibiscus bush until it got to a certain size. In fact, until it got to a certain size, and then she planted it in a certain spot. But man, winter got a hold of it one year anyhow. Story of the first Christmas tree. Legend has it that the first Christmas tree can be traced to Saint Boniface, an 8th century English missionary to the pagan tribes in the land that became Germany, so Germanics. When the saint learned in 723 AD people worshipped a Donner oak or thunder oak dedicated to the Norse god Thor, he chopped it off. Sounds like a horrible thing to do, but Saint Boniface argued that Thor was not a real god. Well, let's go back over that step here just for a second. People worship the Donner oak. Donner goes with the thunder and the Norse gods. And you think that, man, with the modern day with Santa Claus and these reindeer crap and everything, and on Donner, on Blitzen, that's Germanic. On Comet, what does a comet have to do with this? A lot. Have you been paying attention to my videos? On Comet, I'm Cupid. Cupid, here we go with that sexy thing, and oh well, if you go into Cupid deeper, there's much more things that go with Eros and Cupid, but so these names are kept, just like names of the week, and Thursday is Thor's Day, and so on off of it. But this Donner, a thunder oak dedicated to the Norse god Thor, and they chopped it down. Here's a depiction of that type of appearance where you can see that these ancient druids here were watching this guy chop down a tree. Well, this was a sacred tree out of a grove that was one that the Druids worshipped, and he's going to end that to herald in Christianity. Well, Christianity is going to turn around and take another tree just like that because we can't take an oak inside, damn it. The house is made of it. What we'll do is we'll do the same thing that we did before over there and have this other representation in your house. In fact, we already had that going on because you can't take an oak in the house. They had it going on, and there's that holly wreath around their forehead of that ancient druid. I know he looks like Jesus with the spike thing, but shh. If Thor was a real god, he would have killed Boniface, but that didn't happen. So that proves, whatever. Saint Boniface told the people, in fact, that survived the proof of his God was mightier one, and no one wanted to argue with him after this incident. And of course, there was probably somebody a whole lot of strong slack behind him doing this situation, because if he was there by himself, he wouldn't have got the axe above his head, and everybody knows it. So it didn't go down the way that it comes across as he came in and said, blah, blah, blah. And they went, duh. And he chopped down their tree and they went, duh. And then he told them this and they went, okay. No, it doesn't work that way. So according to this legend, St. Boniface, though, planted a fir tree in its place of the oak, and this became the first Christmas tree. Another look at this in Germanic said that after they did this, that by the next year there was already a root coming up and another tree sprouting out of those roots. And this actually proved that you're not going to stop this shit. You don't ever hear about that one. How much of this legend is true is difficult to say, but do we know the first recorded use of a Christmas tree, talking about Christmas, is told in a place of an Estonian monastery in 1441, actually. Now, this idea that if you chop down a tree and it will grow back, you're going to see in the Bible again. But that comes from Sumerian ideals, because this was the same idea, where these people were planting fir trees, and instead of eating the nuts out of a pine cone, they learned to be able to plant them apart from each other enough, like Johnny Appleseed, to keep something going on. But they could only keep it going for a while, and as this area started becoming arid in the desert, it didn't work and receded up northern, and there we have the sacred cedar trees that everybody's picking away at for all their individual purposes. The gates of Shinar. Why the Christmas tree was not accepted by the church until 1640. Well, the church has long been reluctant to accept the tree because of its pagan origins. The tree protected against trolls, witches, and several supernatural creatures, had entities into it and all that stuff, and ooh, that's demony crap, so you gotta nah. Christian leaders couldn't see how the green tree could be incorporated into the Christmas tradition. For a long time, the use of Christmas trees was even forbidden in many countries, at least until about 1640. And then people kind of went, F you, and here you go. In Russia, it was not allowed to have a Christmas tree between 1917 and 1992. Knock, knock. But people didn't want to give up on the tree. Instead of calling it a Christmas tree, they referred to it as a New Year tree, and them damn Russians went ahead and kept going with it. Once the tree became part of the Christmas celebrations in northern Germany, the tradition spread to other European countries. Instead of decorating a tree in the woods, which was the ancient Sumerian way, people took smaller trees and placed them indoors. Queen Victoria introduced the tradition into the United Kingdom, where the tree became very popular. Soon all Christians in many European countries wanted to have a Christmas tree, but only rich people could kind of afford it. Fortunately, this changed in time, and every believer could afford a Christmas tree and its associated ornaments, even if it sometimes was just a smaller one, like Charlie Brown's Christmas. It's more about what it is than anything. I always wanted to have a natural tree. Only had one year, and after having it and getting it probably just a week early, it didn't make it to New Year's and looked almost going to crap on Christmas Day, shedding like crazy. Yeah, I put the extra stuff in the water dish in the bottom, and the whole 9 yards. It just didn't hold good, but God, it was a beautiful tree. But I've since used fake ones. I had a customer that had to do a photo shoot for an expensive Christmas tree maker, and he had a whole lot of extra Christmas trees one time, and he goes, "Hey man, these things are worth like $600. You give me a little credit?" And I go, "Sure, what the hell do you want?" And he went and picked a few things out, and I go, "Pick something else too." "What? Merry Christmas to you." "Well, the hell, okay," and grab something else. Anyhow, in the United States, the Christmas tree tradition was likely introduced by German immigrants, but we talked earlier about Indians up here, and there are more than one that would go around this same situation and have a tree to go with it. When it was exactly the same situation, no. Buddha was set up under a tree and he was enlightened. Certain trees work certain ways. People in Florida have to quit wrapping palm trees up to do it because it looks cool, but if you look closer, it looks like a dick squirting into the air, and that's just looking pretty sick. Let's go from that segue to the Bible itself and see if we can talk about where it's actually at in the Bible. Oh, I thought it was just right there. Don't tell me I lost the link. It's got to be this way. Oh, it was right next to it. So here's Bible study tools. And all I did was look up Christmas and tree in the Bible. You can see it there at the top. Let's pull that out of it here. And so, where is it written there in the Bible? Well, what does the Bible say about Christmas trees? Well, there is some dispute on issue of whether the Bible actually makes a reference to the trees now used in celebration of Christmas. Well, it's a close as hell version. We'll get into that in the flip-flop of both ideas. The specific mention comes from Jeremiah 10:3 through 4, stating that for the practices of the people are worthless. They cut a tree out of the forest, and craftsmen shape it with a chisel. They adorn it with silver and gold. They fasten it with a hammer and nails so it will not totter. So you know how now we've got these 3-pin or 4-pin dills we screw into a thing where it will not totter. But you can see like Charlie Brown and everything, how they nail it to it or they do things. And they're going, yeah, well, they had something to fix it there and it didn't totter. And they use a chisel like you do at the bottom and take off the very bottom of it. So you have the little bottom of the Christmas tree and everything. And that makes sense. And they adorn it with gold. And who the hell is he talking about? He's talking about the pagans and how that practice is worthless. Well, of course, they downplay every pagan. Now, initially it might appear that these verses are referring to Christmas trees, it says, made from the forest and adorned with gold and silver decorations, but a more thorough look at the whole chapter makes it evident that God is speaking about creating a carved image or idol from the trunk of a tree. This made apparent in the explanation of verse 8, but they are altogether dull-hearted and foolish. A wooden idol is worthless doctrine. Well, no, if you turn around and you say Dumuzi is symbolic in this tree, whenever you do this thing, or Jesus Christ right now today is symbolic in this tree, that's a wooden idol. You put an angel on top of it or all kinds of things, or a star that signifies Bethlehem star all the time, and you can't, that's not an idol anything. I don't want anybody to take down their Christmas tree. In fact, I'm enticing you to try to keep it up and have more heart to it and love it a little more. It's kind of hard to whenever you find out the truth and reality of it all, but not really. Whenever you found out it wasn't on Santa Claus, it didn't make you go anything away from it. Once you had kids, I'm sure you have done the same thing and found your own way. Hopefully it snows on Christmas night for you and you can do something like I did. Boy, that lasted a couple of years. And I love the idea of setting things up separate that Santa brought. Whether you want to say 3/4 of it is ours, and then Santa brings a few things, like some people do, or flip-flop it and say, well, we got y'all some stuff that you needed, clothes and all that. Santa doesn't bring so much of that. All this other stuff. There's a beanbag chair. Anyhow. So the other reality of this is that what they're trying to talk about is Asherah and the Asherah pole, where they carved an idol out of wood, and that's paganistic. But actually, the people who are supposed to be talking about this here are the people who used to have this as a symbol of rebirth and the Queen of Heaven, because she was the wife of God, Asherah. Now you can only find her in the Bible as describing her as one of the big poles that held up the tabernacle. And it's not described as being carved. In fact, there are other things where they talked about them knocking down the poles of Asherah and doing the things like that because of all this false idol worship. Esther 9:22 says, as the time when the Jews got relief from their enemies, as the month when their sorrow was turned into joy, and their mourning into a day of celebration, he wrote them to observe the days as days of feasting and joys of giving presents of food to one another and gifts to the poor. What are they talking about? That's Saturnalia. Well, that's if you put that up under one of the definitions in the description of Saturnalia, it'd fit real good, except for you'd have to leave out that J word and just say Roman. But because they also flip-flop the thing and even let the servants order the other one around, so they'd be like, hey, let me serve you for this time and all this stuff. So there was a whole lot of giving and stuff that went along with this and this gift situation and gifts to the poor and gifts of things. Well, it's believed by some people that when all these gifts were set out there and toys that were made that were set out there in that sacred grove, like in some Santa Claus mythos, and given to Dumuzi in the ancient grove and people left off, that what that was for is the less fortunate people would come and divvy that up without having any fights. They were glad to have it, and they would pass it on, and so their kids might have some gift. And where would they say they got it from? No, they wouldn't break down and cry in front of their kids and tell them they couldn't do it or it didn't happen. They told them that God had brought it to them. It's a present from Dumuzi Jesus, from Santa Claus, if you will. Where does he live? He lived on the other side of those big white-capped mountains there, just like the Elvendam story. Yeah, look into it. It's strange. It's like people carried stuff into a modern day, or that just somehow goes with the idea, well, he's got to be over a hill. Okay. The Lord God, though, made all kinds of trees grow out of the ground, trees that were pleasing to the eye and good for food. In the middle of the garden were the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Is one of these those? What's the other one? We talked about that and its whole esoteric meanings in another one, and I could go off for 30 minutes, but hell, I'm at 37 minutes now, aren't I? Yeah. Therefore, the Lord himself gave you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and will call him Emmanuel. I'm sad to mention it too if you haven't noticed, but his name wasn't Emmanuel. That's one of the problems. He didn't, that's what is not his name. And Daniel and the other people say, no, it didn't work out that way. But it did work out in the way that needed to work out, didn't it? A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse. From the roots, a branch will bear fruit. What? Well, that oak thing did that thing too. And luckily, during cutting down, so a tree can grow another fruit. Here it is in your Bible. And a branch can grow another fruit, and that's got all these esoteric meanings go along with it, but it goes back to the Sumerians where they chopped down that tree, and then the next year when they came back, there were more trees. They were back. In fact, one had grown directly out of the stump instantly, like a brand new one. And they were like, hey, let's use this one as the one that's the symbol because it's resurrected. And they're like, oh, what the hell? There are cylinder seals rolled out that show you this exact situation in Dumuzi emerging from a tree. Jeremiah 3:6 says, during the reign of King Josiah, the Lord said to me, have you seen what faithless Israel has done? She's gone up on every high hill and under every spreading tree and has committed adultery there. Well, what do you mean? Are they going and having sex under trees? Well, yeah, that was a thing to do back in the day too and stuff, and you hang around up under a tree whenever you're short-winded. Well, why is this a thing? Well, it's for the shade, but also trees suck in carbon dioxide and give off oxygen. You're feeding the tree, and the tree is helping you to get back in situation right there. Any place that there's large green growing plants is almost like there's a little oxygen there for you. A little extra, a little bit. Jeremiah 17:8, they will be like a tree planted by the water that sends out its roots by the stream. It does not fear when heat comes. Its leaves are always green. It has no worries in a year of drought and never fails to bear fruit. What the hell is that? It's a pine tree. Sounds like they like it quite a bit right there. Yeah, it's screwed up if you keep going through it. They can contradict themselves quite a bit, but if you look at the esoteric meanings behind it, not so much. One is exposing, though, the others are revealing. There's the difference between those two. In Job, even, one of the oldest books, it says, at least there's hope for a tree. If it's cut down, it will sprout again, and its new shoots will not fail. What's that all about? It goes back to Dumuzi. Was it go back before that? Yeah, I think before then people chopped down trees, and then they were able to notice whether or not if things grew back, and they noticed that, hey, when I chopped down this tree, and this is right where we were, now there's a bunch of little trees growing up that wouldn't have gotten any sunlight. Like in the old Rush song about there's trouble with the trees and they're not getting enough sunlight and all that story. Man, I could go off about that. Leviticus 23:40, on the first day you're to take branches from luxuriant trees, from palms, willows, and other leafy trees, and rejoice before the Lord your God 7 days. What? Yeah, so holly and all those things, that's the same situation goes on with it. What's wrong with it? Well, it's palms. Well, you can imagine Mediterranean and here in the Near East, that's what's going to be going on. And palms keep going on and going on and going on. Yeah, in Florida, they go year round. There they go, bearing fruit. What's up with that? And there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks by night. And then they saw a spaceship come down and put a beam down. Well, that's the only way that people from different angles would think this one city was where it was going on. And let me tell you, it wouldn't be just shepherds that would show up in the whole 9 yards. Did a video about the 3 wise men, the 3 kings, and the magi. Look it up if you want to. It'll give you some revelations. And one of them's kind of funny. The other one is a little more serious, but direct. Matthew even said, likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. Yeah, that's just whenever they start giving connotations to it. And of course, Jesus even gets so mad at a tree that's not bearing fruit, he strikes it down. Anyhow, that doesn't sound very Christmassy. Well, it was out of season, even too, by the way that they described of when they were. And that's kind of strange. Wouldn't he realize it? Well, sure. So again, we've discussed Christmas. Look, there are wreaths right up here wrapped around there too, much as well as the head of Jesus drew it. But man, there are probably a few more different ways I could go with this, but I think I'll leave it at that and try to leave as much in it as I can. Stockings. And he comes down and puts it in that, puts it in your shoe. So all kinds of things about the Yule log and special traditions that people have. And your family might have developed traditions. You might have a white elephant gift idea going on now. And it hasn't been going that long, but since Grandma got old and da-da-da-da. Well, that's time has passed, but you're passing that on. Try to pass that on again. Keep passing it on. Keep making it happen. Whenever your kids grow up and they start to do it, whenever they start to have Christmas at your house and you become grandma, you're going to have that same thing go on. Pass it on so it's rich in them. So when you pass on, well, that's like grandma before. Yeah, you've gone all the way through your life and became grandma. Isn't that incredible, Grandpa? Cherish the fruit of your labors and your children and your children's children, your grandkids. Give them noisy Christmas gifts and try to give them something that they're really going to use and will enhance and help their intelligence in some way. Yeah, whatever age group, there is something there. Definitely. Like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy. Merry Christmas here, 2020, guys. Won't be too much longer. We'll be through with this, and we'll be at 2021, but it's just another day. It's not like the world's just going to all straighten up, or they're going to all of a sudden have this New Year's revolution or something going on. Did I say revolution or resolution?